What's up, Wholesale Nation? I'm Andre King.
And I'm Andy Speed.
And welcome to the Wholesale Nation podcast. If this is your first time tuning in, this is the podcast that we give away all the details it takes to be a successful wholesaler, along with interviewing the top wholesalers from across the nation. Also, we are the owners of Draco Properties, a nationwide wholesale company. So if you have properties that you're looking to move or properties that you're looking to sell, hit us up at offers@dracoproperties.com. And we need your help. Andy's been checking the reviews. So if you like what you hear, don't forget to smash the like button. Don't forget to leave a review and share this with a friend. With that said, let's get this show started. Andy, what have you been up to?
Work or personal?
Both.
Both. I think the biggest thing in my life personally right now is the actually influenced by you was the 75 hard.
Okay.
So I'm probably 3 weeks into failing. No, I'm probably realistically. I picked up the exercising piece. Was trying to pick up habits, and then I'd known about 75 hard,
right?
But decided to formalize it a little bit. It's your influence,
right?
I've been doing that, so I'm on day 3, but that's not because I'm 3 days into it. It's because I had a bad weekend. Mm-hmm. Actually, I had a really good weekend, but just been doing that, doing a lot of trail riding. Reshifted how I'm treating my day.
Right.
I found that especially when COVID hit, and I think COVID just basically put a magnifying glass under the parts of my life that needed to change.
Right.
Right. Because some of that with the increased time from COVID, I'm no longer driving anywhere. I'm no longer traveling to the office, et cetera. I got more time, an hour to 3 hours per day increase just because I'm not going anywhere. Right. And I wanted to fill that time with good habits. Mm-hmm. And then, I started noticing my energy level going down because I was less active, et cetera, not moving as much. So started doing that, and definitely I'm seeing the benefits of it now. It's kind of gone into overdrive as you've heard, in our personal conversations, but every day until 1:30 is my time. Mm-hmm. And that's extremely exaggerated for what it is for most people in their morning routine.
Right.
But the only things that I'm doing before 1:30 are the things that I want to do.
Right.
That involves exercising, that involves our team meetings, that involves some sales training. It does involve some calls, some work. But it is me time. Mm-hmm. So, and it's a time for growth. So, I'm pretty excited about that. And I found that I'm a lot more productive in the evenings and well into the evenings rather than, depriving myself all the time and then not having any time left for play. So I'm playing first and working, doing the things that I want to do until 1:30, and then it's time to get my to-do list done.
Right.
So it's been very different.
Yeah, and for me, I think this is I'm on my second habits book. I got one more habits book.
You finished Atomic?
Atomic I'm finishing now.
Okay.
And then I have the Millionaire Success Habits coming up next. But each one of those books talked about what you just said, right? Putting together a routine every single morning, something that you can get on, something that you can stick with, something that it gives you control of your day, basically, just like you just said. And so for those who hadn't heard of 75 Hard, it's something that I picked up from Andy Frisella. And it's basically just a daily routine, right, that you do for 75 days. You cannot break from it. It has 5 things that you need to do. You need to exercise twice a day. One has to be outside. Drink a gallon of water. You need to take a picture. What do you call it? Progress
picture. That burned me once.
Yeah, it's the simple things that will get you in this.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Take a progress picture each day. What else we got?
Saturday and Sunday I only worked out once, so I didn't get burned there as well. So yeah, work out twice a day. 45 minutes being outside. Mm-hmm. That's been extremely easy, and both of mine have been outside. Since I started.
Yeah.
Really. I've done the occasional inside yoga, probably about 2-3 times a week. I've done yoga inside, stretching, etc. But what else we got? You got the gallon of water, exercise twice a day, follow the diet.
Yeah. Follow the diet was the last one. Right?
Yeah.
It's all about getting on a routine and sticking with it for 75 days, right? And it's it has things in there that kind of tricks you up, but it's made to it's not made to be easy. That's why it's called 75 Hard. I finished it a couple of months ago, and now on the phase 1 of it. So if you want to check it out, check out his website, and he has information on that.
Yeah, the progress pic is annoying.
Yeah.
I've got a bunch of selfies now in my camera roll, and Yeah.
Yeah, it does. You have to make sure you don't click the wrong button when you send in pictures.
Yeah,
and
right.
like that. But yeah, I just created an album and put it in. But it was good to see where I started and what I look like afterwards, right?
Yeah.
So that's a good thing about it. But it is one of the things that will trick you up very easily, and you forget to do it. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's been a life changer for me. And I think, for business wise, just in the wholesale business, for us, with the COVID thing going on, it gave us a chance to really dial down our systems. And, that's what I've been focused on. Right. I think our sales team has done an excellent job over the last couple of months on dealing with bringing in contracts so much that it overwhelmed our dispositions team, or they weren't prepared for what was getting ready to come in, especially some of the out of town deals that we've been doing since we've been buying virtual. So now we've dialed in those systems. We'll have a podcast where we'll talk about that, what we did and how we dialed that in, and the success we've been having on that. Right. But some of it is a work in progress still, but I think now we're moving in the right direction and starting getting those deals closed in a timely manner.
How many deals did we contract in July?
In July, we ended up
30.
with, I think, July we had 24, I believe. May have been 25. I'll have to check. In the month of July.
I thought we hit 30 in July.
No, it was 20. I think it was 24 is what we ended up with. I'll have to check.
I may have added in closings or something.
Yeah, you probably did. Ain't nothing wrong with that. I like closings.
Yeah.
A closing is much better than a contract. But yeah, it was, we've had a couple of, back-to-back good months. The team is dialed in. We're still, for the most part, working remotely from home. And so very proud of the team that everyone has just kept their head up. Everyone kept working. They're still performing. Phone calls are still happening. We're still closing deals, right? And so we're kind of slowly moving back into the office. Depends on what this old Mr. COVID.
Speaking of, man, it's good seeing you. It's been a while.
Yeah, I know. Where have you been?
It's been a long time.
I know, huh? So, Andy's slimmed down a little bit. Now he's been working out, doing this 75 hard. So good to see you.
Just think about all the people that we're going to have to re-meet at networking events.
Yeah, I know.
It's been 6 months.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Yeah.
So, all right, well, let's kick it off today. So,
right.
You want to kick us off, Andre?
Yeah. So today's show, in order to get started in wholesaling and be able to sell a deal, you got to be able to evaluate a deal, right? And so today's show is going to be about, what do you do when you cannot find a comp on a property or comparable, right? And so I know, we may have some new people that are here today listening. So we're going to start with just the basics.
And even if you're not new, every now and again you get that head scratcher.
Right. Like, well,
what do you can't figure out the value, whether it's unique.
Yeah.
It may be just in an area, like we have some areas in town where stuff just does not sell.
Right.
And it's not because when it goes on the market, it doesn't sell. It's just because the people there hang on to it and they don't ever sell. And in Houston, you can't go that far out in your comps to assess a value.
Right.
It's different. So, and then sometimes you get properties here, because we have so much land where there's nothing around, there's nothing nearby. So how do you value stuff like that?
Right. So that's what we're going to talk about. But, before we get started, let's talk about what is a comp, first of all, because I think that's the first thing that tricks people up is, or even new wholesalers, even our salespeople when they first get started is not knowing what is a comp. So what is a comp in your definition when you're looking at a property?
So first off, comp means comparable. So we're looking for a basis of value based on, what people are willing to pay in the area.
Right.
So it's supply and demand, right? So supply and demand comes into play, and what we use is like houses in the area to see what they've sold for, how long they've sold for, or how long it took them to sell, rather.
Right.
And then just compare the values.
Right. Yeah, and it's funny. I think it was just a short while ago. You said, "Hey, I was surprised to see that you used 250 square foot plus or minus." I thought maybe you use a percentage or something like that, 10% or something. I think is what you said. I can't remember exactly what you said.
So we do 10%.
Yeah,
I do 10% typically. So if you're in a 2,500 square foot house, you go plus or minus 250 square feet. 1,500 square foot house plus or minus 150.
Right.
I like the percentage of the square foot just because if you go 200 square feet plus or minus, 200 square feet plus or minus may be a much bigger difference in a 1,500 square foot house versus a 4,000 square foot house. 200 square feet in a 4,000 square foot house really doesn't make a lot of difference.
Right.
It's a smaller closet.
Okay.
Makes a much bigger difference in a 1,200 square foot house.
Okay. And so let's say that I have a, the house that I'm selling is a 3,000 square foot house, right? And I see a house that I think is very close to it, right next door is comparable, is 1,200. And I just take the dollars per square foot and multiply it times my 3,000 square foot. That sounds like what I should do.
Yeah, I hate the dollars per square foot, as you know. I think that's why you brought it up. But everything's different in a 1,000 square foot house versus a 2,000 square foot house. You still only have one kitchen, one bath, et cetera. As you increase in square foot, your dollars per square foot goes down.
Yeah,
always.
Yeah,
because there's still only one kitchen, X number of baths. You don't put two kitchens in a 4,000 square foot house.
right.
So yeah, if you don't know, as you go up in square footage, you go down in dollars per square foot. So we just don't even look at dollars per square foot for anything except for repairs.
Yeah. Yeah, and the reason I said that is because you see that a lot when blasts come out and things like that, and you're looking at the comps and you're like, man, how did they come up with this, right? And then you see a house that's like much smaller, and they give you this 3,000 square foot house, but the ARV that they have doesn't match. Like there's nothing in the neighborhood that's ever sold that high before, right? And so it's a pie in the sky, and then that's of course what the buyer's going to see at the same time. What we're going to talk about here in just a second.
Another thing that disconnects you from the land.
Yeah.
So when you start looking at that, you disconnect from the land altogether, and you need to appraise this thing. Just look at it, step back, look at it from all different angles, and try to assess the value based on what other people have paid in the area.
Right. And so why is that important?
Well, I mean, it's one of the three things that you need to know in order to lock up a deal. Mm-hmm. I mean, you need to know the value at the end of the day. You need to know the number for the amount in repairs to get it to that value. Mm-hmm. And then you also need to know where your market is buying.
Right.
So the assessment of the value at the end of the day is kind of where you start.
Right.
And you can't be glass half full in that. You need to look at this. You need to protect your investors' downside risk.
Yeah.
So if the house could be worth, after you do a very thorough comp job, it could be worth anywhere from 140 to 155, and you really don't know where it's going to land. If you can buy it off that 140, you're winning.
Yeah.
If you buy it off 155 and then you've got the same issue with your repairs, you got that range, and then you buy off the low side, I mean, you're screwing yourself out of margin ultimately.
Yeah.
But you may be making it to where it's too hard to sell.
Right. And so extremely important. Like if you're planning on contracting a property at the right price, you got to know exactly what it's comping at, right? And so what should a person use if they're looking to comp a property?
Oh, the ideal is the MLS. Mm-hmm. I don't know what, across the nation, what their rules for the MLS are, but our MLS here in Houston is HAR, and it covers multiple counties. Mm-hmm. I think in some directions we can get 100 plus miles away and still have reasonable number of comps for the area. But MLS is obviously the best.
Right.
There are some programs you may be able to recommend.
Yeah. So I would say, I would echo what you said. The MLS is by far the best because most likely the buyer is going to be looking at the MLS, right? And they're familiar with looking up properties on there. But we also buy virtually, right? And so we found that, of course, our MLS doesn't work in Ohio or, somewhere north of Texas. So Zillow, and we also use PropStream. Right. So we use a combination of the two, depends on where the property's at. I've gotten to where I actually like to use Zillow Souls, not Zillow Zestimate. There is a big difference between Zillow Sold and Zillow Zestimates, right? The Zestimate's just a hodgepodge of properties that are thrown together. And you could have a high property and a low property, and you could, so that it doesn't work.
This is my first time hearing this, and I'm kind of shocked.
Yeah.
Zillow Sold?
Yeah, so the Zillow Sold is what I found is that those are actually what the property sold for, right? And that's what I look at. So it's and I can tell you the reason why I like it from an out of town point of view is I can quickly look. I don't have to log into anything. I put in the address, and I look at the map, and then it's just like the MLS at that point. I'm looking for just the properties that are sold. I'm seeing what they sold at, and it's giving me an idea of what the comps are going to be at that point, right? If I want to get more detail, then I'll pop into PropStream. PropStream is going to have a little bit more detail on how the person pays. It's going to be more equivalent to an MLS, which what I'm told they're constantly getting the information pulled in from all these MLSs. So it is going to have some more detail like the MLS will have.
What a crazy undertaking.
Yeah, that is
going out to every MLS in the U.S. and pulling the data.
Yeah, that's got to be.
That's got to be an incredible undertaking.
That's a lot of work, but it does the job. job, right? And so if you're working both of those between Zillow, if you need to do something quick, so that's what I start with. You know, when the sales team's like, hey, you know, looking at this property, first thing I do is pull up Zillow, do it very quickly. I can do that with my phone, and then if I need to get more detail, I'll jump into to PropStream and find it from there. Okay. So if you aren't using those, you need to be using those to help pull your comps, especially if you're nationwide and don't have access to MLS. Okay.
And if another tip, if you aren't telling your sales guys to go to the next sales guy to help them with the comp,
right,
you're going to end up like Andre answering calls 10 times a day,
oh, yeah.
asking them about what do you think the value is of this, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah.
You just, if it's John calling you, push him over to Tim. If
right.
it's Tim, push him over to John.
There you go.
The reality is if the information is not there to get an accurate basis for value, then our investor is going to have that same problem.
Right.
And sometimes they're looking for a magical answer that's not there. And I get it. It sucks, man. How many times have I called you, hey, what do you think about the value of this property? You know, because it does help to get a second opinion sometimes. But the reality is, in a lot of these scenarios, is you just have to buy. What's the number you couldn't say no at?
Yeah.
You know, there's not a property, just so you know, there's not a property in the United States that I would not buy for $1.
Yeah.
There's no acreage too small. I'll buy it for $1. So there's a price for everything. So you have to, sometimes you just have to, what's the number that we cannot say no at?
Yeah. Yeah. And the only time I would say that doesn't work is we have run into some issues with we could have bought it for $1, but the person owed $1 million. So it didn't make a difference. Right. But it did work. Right.
You do enough marketing, you'll end up getting a free property.
Yeah. You'll end up getting a free one after a while. But yeah, I would say that, when you can't find a comp is when the issues start coming in. But before we get there, you were talking about the sales team. One thing I noticed from our sales team is sometimes they will try to make the numbers work, right? And once you set the comp and you're saying, okay, this is where I believe this house this is the as-is condition if you work in as-is condition, or you're saying, hey, this is the after repair value of the property based on the comps that you're seeing, then it's set. Right. Don't put in your repairs and start working your numbers and say, you know what, this ain't quite 70%. I'm at 85. You know what? I saw a house like 10 miles away and that house was about $20,000 more. I think this one is it may get there also. So then you start moving the numbers. Right. And you start seeing that on like websites. You start getting on, what is it? My house deals and things like that. There's certain websites you can't put things on unless the ARV has like a 15% delta or something like that. And usually people just start making up stuff, right? And I'd tell our sales team that it doesn't make sense to make it up because we're not. You
create a problem for yourself later.
Yeah, we're not going to be able to move it.
So when you're glass half full and everything, and you've got these rose-colored glasses on, do you only create more work for yourself later?
Right.
In our case, it's our dispo team. Our dispo team gets their butt kicked every time that we sign up for something that we shouldn't be signing up for. And we've learned the hard way.
Yeah.
And it's not because our guys are going into stuff with the intention for it to fall through, but the values, the discount piece, we're having to learn about each of the different markets.
Right.
So, there are areas like Steve up in Indy where they're buying houses for $40,000 all in, and they're renting them for $900 a month. Here that's a $90,000 house.
Yeah.
But there's some areas where the demand is just not there. So the prices have dropped, and we need to adjust for that. We need to learn our lessons in each of the new markets that we enter, but we also need to be cautious of that.
Right.
And that should tell in the numbers using Zillow Sold, as you said.
Right.
Which still makes me nervous saying that. I still haven't seen it. So
yeah,
that's scary to say.
Yep, that's the way to go now. You figure Zillow has all the data. They're selling properties now, so.
Are they back to selling? Because they backed away.
So I started seeing OfferPad. I'm starting to see their
OfferPad's back.
Yeah, so they're coming back. So you'll see the iBuyers are starting to come back now. They all kind of ran away. Zillow will be back. I mean, they're huge, right? So they have a lot of data. I would assume more data than the MLS has because they have nationwide data on everything. But you can't go after, as I said, you can't go Zestimate. You have to still do the work, look at each individual property, see what it's sold at, get that data. But so that's all fine and dandy, Andy. All right. All right. So, but what do you do when you go into an area? We run into this all the time, and you can't find a comp. What do you do in those situations?
What's the number you can't say no?
Okay. All right.
You know, you need to guard your time. So that seller is either they want to get rid of it for a number that we can pay or they don't. And, you know, I want to guard our acquisition guys' time because I want them closing properties.
Right.
And I don't want our dispositions wasting time trying to make $5K on something that, you know, takes them 60 hours. That's not what we want. You know, if every property takes 5 hours, I want to be making as much money as I possibly can with that 5 hours.
Right. But why not just open up? So I start seeing like a couple of things start happening. Right. And each area may be different. Like, so let's say that I'm looking at a neighborhood and let's say I'm in maybe it's a neighborhood where no one moves. Like, what do you do in that situation? Like, the people are just, you know, they stay there till they die. We have neighborhoods like that here in Houston. The people, they stay till they die. And when a house becomes available, it does sell, but we got to wait till people die.
Yeah. And it's one of those where 90% of the homes are generational homes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we definitely have those, and there's very few comps, few and far between. You just have to know your area.
Yeah.
You know, there's a tremendous demand in those areas. You just can't prove it.
Yeah.
So you need to sell to somebody that knows the area the same, and it just comes down to knowing your market.
Right.
You know, and I know you're speaking of Pasadena, where there's some areas, some neighborhoods where it's extremely difficult to find comps, and it's not because people don't live there, and it's not because it's not a nice community, et cetera. It's just because people don't sell.
Yeah.
You know, it was their grandma's house, you know, and the family just passes it down, et cetera. Yeah. And in Houston, obviously we have a pretty high Hispanic population. That's pretty common in the culture to pass the house down. As Alex, you know, a friend of ours says, they're not buying a house for their kids. They're buying it for their grandkids.
Right.
And that's true in the comps in some of these areas.
Yeah. And I would say, you know, in those areas, you can go back and look at, you know, historical data, like, you know, when a property did come available, you know, how fast did it move on the market? What was the days on market? Maybe, you know, as soon as it came up, it was gone. But you still got to make sure not to use that as your high comp, right? You can't, it's like Andy said, it still has to be at a price that everyone will, you know, multiple people will be able to buy it from, right? Because we still don't know what's going on in that neighborhood.
Yeah, you do have to be a detective. And I think that's great advice that you just gave there. Go back. I've gone back 4 or 5 years at times just to see what a neighborhood's done. You know, when I'm in this little pocket and there's no data.
Right.
And you can assume that inflation, the values are higher, et cetera. But if you can buy it on that number from 2017 when the last house sold, you're doing pretty good knowing what's happened in the Houston market. And there's been, you know, in some cases, 100% increase in values in some areas.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I like about, you can do it in MLS and looking at realists. I know our disposition uses it for that, but one of the things I like about PropStream is that you can find off-market data. And so sometimes you can move into neighborhoods and there's a lot of, there could be off-market things going on in that neighborhood, and that can give you a sense of what people are buying at off-market.
Well, it's even better because that gives you what the investor's buying.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in some of these areas, it's the same. They've sold to individuals and they don't pop up on the MLS.
Right.
So, yeah, that's great that PropStream will allow you to see that value.
Yeah. And that, of course, you know, help you be able to, you know, get the property at the right price. Right.
What is the right price? We don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever it is for your area.
Yeah. It's whatever it is for that area and whatever people are willing to buy it for. Yep. Right. And let's say that, you know, for us, right, we're buying kind of all over. Right. And let's say you have a property that's in a, you know, rural area. Like, how do you go about, and you don't see a lot of comps in that area. How would you figure out a comp on that area?
Something in a rural area? I may look at the acreage. If there's some acreage that is sold, if I can buy it, just assuming the house doesn't even exist, that would be ideal. You know, I may add that into the value. Land, when you add land into it, it both simplifies it and makes it tricky. But I like breaking it down. Err on the side of caution. Right. You know, if I can buy it for the land value, if it's, you know, some little 1940s pier and beam house that was, you know, grandma's house over on the hill in the pasture in the country, then yeah, I'm going to try to buy it just for the land because the house really didn't hold a lot of value.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so bottom line is that anytime you're trying to comp a property, the main thing is it needs to be apples to apples, right? always go off your low comps, right?
Yeah, protect your downside.
Yeah,
I think those are the two most important things. Know your values and protect your downside.
Yeah. And I think, like I said earlier, that's probably the biggest issue that I would see that our salespeople, even myself in the past, like you said, you want to you look at all the numbers and you're talking to the salesperson and they're saying a number that if the comps work out perfectly, you can make it happen, right? And you want to pull the trigger on it because you're like, man, I got this one property. I don't know why it sold so much more than the other ones. Okay. Later you find out it was owner finance and you're like, damn, I wish I wouldn't have, but you end up overvaluating the property and you take their what they wanted and you don't work it down. And
it's interesting you say that. I see how that happens and I've definitely made bad judgment calls, but you and I, both of us, as our practice shows, that we will protect the downside for the investor and give them upside.
Yeah.
Like we had that one flip that we sold. We knew that it was a lot higher. We knew it was going to be 60, 70 grand higher than what we were able to attribute the value. I think we put it at 310 and it ended up being 365. So 55.
Right.
But he ended up making over 100K on that flip. And we got to give the investor the upside. Yeah. So if you can buy it and sell it off the downside, then your investor's fine. You need to pretend that it's your money.
Yeah.
And if you're not going to put your money into it, then why would your investor?
Yeah. And now that one's sold, someone else that, he set the market, we help him set it. But now when someone finds something in that area, that property,
be much higher.
now they know what the value is.
Well, and what's interesting about that one is we didn't know how to value it because it was one of the only comps that hadn't flooded.
Yeah.
So there was none of the other ones in the neighborhood that hadn't flooded had sold since Harvey. And there was like 8 or 9 that had sold, but they all flooded.
Right.
Or most of them flooded. So there really weren't any comps that were updated and hadn't flooded in the area and hadn't been for as far as I went back, which was probably a couple of years. Yeah. By the time we sold the property. But either way, the investor was very happy and he came back and bought the next one that kind of fit his mold. So had that for a while though.
And we've had that happen several times. I mean, we had the one that we thought about making it our office. Same situation.
That's the same one. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So same thing. Yeah.
I don't remember what it was called, but Dermot.
Yeah, Dermot. But so it happens, right? And like you said, if you if you make sure you're on that low side, the end of the day you'll be able to move the property. And the other thing is that you have more options to move the property. You don't want to you don't want to be the person that's saying the landlord special, right? Yeah. I want to say landlord special, right?
But it is a landlord special.
Yeah, but it can be flipped. You can do whatever. But this is the best property. The only reason why I would, as a wholesaler that you would ever want to say that it's a landlord special is actually if you're trying to sell it to the highest buyer. And that person is probably going to be the person who can pay the most for it versus the flipper. But doesn't mean that you didn't get it at the right price, right? That shouldn't stop you from getting it let's say you bought this thing at 50%. Right. I still want to sell it. I'm going to put landlord special because that's who I want to sell it to. That person's probably going to pay 85 or plus percent in our neighborhoods. Right. Versus a flipper is going to pay 70. Right. But I don't want to save myself out of into a deal by saying landlord special because I contracted it at 85%. Right. And that's the issues that you see out there.
Oh, for sure.
All right. So what else do people need to know about comps before we get out of here?
That's it. I mean, it's do it right the first time. And then you won't have to go back to your seller and waste extra time. Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest part, right? We talk about our buyers, right? But I think at the end of the day, a lot of our sellers, they have a lot going on, right? The properties that we're buying, they're a headache. They would just go to probably a realtor if they didn't have the issues with the property, right? So they want to sell it, and they've already, I would say most people in their mind have already packed, right? So if you don't do your job of going in and evaluating the property the right way, so that you get it at the right price, that you can move it, then I think that's the person who suffers the worst in this situation, right? So guys, again, do your due diligence. Hope this all helps you out. Again, if you like what you hear, don't forget to write us a review. right? We'd love to hear some reviews from everyone, and share this with a friend if you like it. Okay. With that said, guys, we appreciate everyone for listening. Y'all come back now. You hear?